Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Therapist Theater. My name is Josh Treese, and I'm coming to you from Music City, USA, with a podcast that takes a look at relationships and mental health through the lens of movies, TV, and pop culture. I'm recording this intro on the night before the episode posts. Leigh-Ann and I just got back from seeing Shazam, and wow. I think it's the best movie that DC has made yet. And before you at me, Nolan made the Dark Knight trilogy, Donner made the Christopher Reeve Superman, and I'm not counting Shaquille O'Neal's Steel. Shazam was amazing. Incredible themes of abandonment, isolation, the effects of feeling inferior versus chosen family, belonging, and home. Go see it as soon as you can. And speaking of seeing things as soon as you can, have you seen that place in the podcast app /iTunes where you can rate the podcast that you're listening to? I need your help to get the word out about Therapist Theater. You can help others learn about mental health and relationship issues while talking about movies by leaving the show a 5-star rating and writing a review. It helps increase the visibility for the show and helps us spread the word. This week's guest is Emily Pardy. She's the founder and CEO of Ready Nest Counseling here in Nashville, and her practice specializes in helping people who are experiencing conception, pregnancy, postpartum, infertility, or loss. I didn't even know that there was someone specializing in this, and getting a chance to talk with her was incredibly eye-opening. Today, we talk about 2009's Away We Go, starring John Krasinski and Maya Rudolph. Emily is not someone that you want to sleep on, and this episode is an important one, so I don't want to waste another second. Let's get to it. Go ahead, dim the lights, raise the curtain, and start the previews. Welcome to the theater. Start every week. I said we as if I'm part of the royal family. As a therapist, there's probably some way that I'm trying to not take responsibility for what I'm doing by using a plural.
We appreciate that.
Yeah. It's fun to analyze yourself. But I like to ask everybody at the beginning, just as a way to get to know them, why therapy?
Why therapy? Yeah, great question. I love this question on your podcast, and it's definitely got my wheels turning. I really became a therapist pragmatically because I needed the credential, as silly as that sounds. My story kind of takes me back to premarital counseling. Josh, my husband we're going on 13 years now.
Wow.
And we loved premarital counseling. And when we were thinking about starting a family, we went back to our premarital counselor and asked, is now a good time to start a family? How do we know now is a good time? Can you counsel us? Can we work through those issues? And
so you were out of premarital?
Yeah,
and
yeah.
We went back for guidance? Okay.
We were a couple years married and went back to the same therapist. And had really enjoyed that experience. It was not our first time in counseling for either of us, but really resonated with him as a couples counselor. And so we loved that experience. And then he was like, so nothing's wrong? And we're like, no, nothing's wrong. We don't know in this stage in our life, like, are we ready to be parents? What's that journey look like? How do we know what to expect? So we spent a good 4 months in counseling and kind of made our own curriculum, if you will, with him, just discussing our expectations before we even ever started trying to conceive.
Wow.
Yeah. And then it took us about a year to conceive our first, so we had a good amount of time to invest in our relationship through that emotional roller coaster of trying. And then it, of course, took 9 months to then have the baby, right? So by the time we had our firstborn, we really felt the benefits of being able to transition pretty smoothly into parenthood. And it wasn't like it was perfect, but we had done the work relationally to where we weren't blaming each other for, staying up all night and being tired. And, we didn't let those things get the best of us. We really, really enjoyed that season. I look back on that very fondly. So then, really changed my world, our world. And we had our second daughter just 20 months later. So it was kind of a whirlwind. I can see your eyes.
I'm so bad at math. I was adding it up a year and 8 months.
Matilda had turned 1. And then 2 days later, we found out we were pregnant with Daphne. And so then it was kind of shocking because it had taken us a little while to conceive the first time. So then I started a blog called Pardy Mama at the time and was writing pretty regularly about my own transition into motherhood. And then when Daphne was born, I decided to write my first book, For All Maternity. And it is about my jumping, headfirst into motherhood and then how it changed all my relationships with my husband, my friends, myself, my own body, my God, And so once I wrote that and was still blogging, I started getting some feedback from other moms kind of all over the place and would write for different online forums. And as mothers were contacting me, I just felt ill-equipped. I was like, I can speak from my own experience. I can speak from what my story has taught me, but I remember talking with my husband a lot about, if I want to actually impact this community, I need to know what I'm talking about.
So at that point, educationally, you're operating off of, had you finished your undergrad at that point?
Yeah. I had my undergrad in English.
Okay.
So I was a writer, essentially. Okay. I was finally claiming okay, I finished a book, so I guess I can call myself a writer.
Well, I mean, Stephen King says, a writer is a person who writes.
I guess.
So whether or not you have a degree or whatever.
True.
The writer that says they're a writer, but they just have the empty notebook sitting on the desk they never get to, they're not really.
Yeah, I just felt like I was vomiting on paper all the time, and then people were like, that resonated with me. And I'm like, really? Thank you.
What do you think was it that made it resonate? I mean, if you had to...
I hope honesty, without... For me, I see two camps of a lot of the mommy bloggers out there. Some are nice and shiny Instagram perfect pictures, right? The other are the comedian Chardonnay at 9 a.m, and I'm neither of those. Those are extremes, and I see there's pretty much the rest of the world is just trying to get our crap together, and a whole lot of normal in the middle.
I was going to say, it seems like both of those ends of the pole are fantasies.
Totally.
And, somewhere in the middle's got to be reality.
Yeah.
And do you feel like maybe that's where people that were feeling connected to you felt like you were landing?
I hope so. Yeah. And yet still seeking advice, which is normal. I was too. I was looking up stuff and asking friends. And so that's where I felt like, I need to get a credential. I want to speak beyond my story. Mm-hmm. And I want to understand the dynamics through evidence, through, is this just our experience, or is there something to this that, I thought it was a great and normal idea to go back to counseling before deciding to start a family, but that wasn't a thing. And so it got me thinking, at some point, premarital counseling wasn't a thing. Mm-hmm. Somebody had to decide, maybe we should talk to somebody before we get married, right?
Or maybe somebody was required.
Uh-huh. And now it's normal. It really is not taboo. Even non-Christians, a lot of them, we're picking out the cake and the colors, and we got our premarital counseling, and nobody's like, oh my gosh, what happened? What's wrong? It's fine. And that
part of the process.
Yeah. And that is truly where I want to turn the tide. And that sparked something in me to, that's where the beginnings of Ready Nest Counseling, my current practice, started with. So we packed up our 2 toddlers and moved across the country to Nashville from Orange County, California on nothing but faith. Did not have a job at the time.
Wow.
Whole lot of prayers and crazy looks. And started once I was accepted into the grad program at Lipscomb University. Shout out to Lipscomb. We landed here. And my brother, Matt, and his wife, Karin, who you've had on your show, were already living here. They'd lived in Nashville for probably over 20 years at that time. So we've been in and out of the city.
So is that why you came?
Mm-hmm.
Or did you already have your eye on Lipscomb before you?
We had our eye on Nashville for a while.
Okay.
Just knowing life in Orange County with children was not sustainable for our ideals. I did not foresee us being able to ever buy a house in California.
I mean, I left Orange County in 2008. But even when I got there in like 2003, I mean, I had a buddy that bought a 2-bedroom condo for $350, something like that.
Wow, that's pretty good, honestly.
I mean,
it's crazy though.
Yeah.
And now that's probably worth $800,000.
Well, I had a buddy that sold his for like $380 that same year and had bought it in the late 90s for $90,000.
Good heavens.
So I mean, just the equity on that, sheesh.
Yeah.
So I had the same thought leaving there. Like, there's no way I'm going to own a home here. There's no way I can build a family. So you guys came out this way.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Jumped into grad school with 2 toddlers, and then we were juggling some jobs. And so then, I graduated, and 2 weeks later had our 3rd daughter.
Oh my gosh.
That kind of sums up me,
Yeah.
Just go, just keep trucking along, just make it happen, right? And then I took, quote unquote, time off as much as a mother of 3 could, to just study Nashville and millennials and the market. And I'd had a bit of a marketing background working at Biola University in Southern California, and just the team there in their marketing department is unbelievable, just crazy talent. So I did not know at the time why I needed to learn those things, right?
Yeah.
And then getting out of grad school, I always say if readiness counseling had existed, I would have happily just come and applied and gotten a job here. Like, that would have been stellar. But it didn't exist, right? And so there was this gap I saw in the market between the birth world and the mental health world, and nobody was filling that gap. So Readiness Counseling started July 2016 with 0 clients, and I had 1 day a week in an office. And I just wanted to serve the community that faced conception, pregnancy, postpartum infertility, and loss. And God has opened doors, and I have prayed and tried to walk through them diligently as it has grown from there. And now we have 6 on staff in 3 locations. Yeah. And it's a little bit of a, like, I just am trying to catch up.
Yeah. It seems like, I mean, I can definitely understand spotting that there's not really anybody servicing this unique, intersection of the Venn diagram between mental health and the birth community, and then going after it. And I would suspect that being able to, one of the things I've said on the show before is stewarding someone's story well. I would suspect being able to steward that well whenever you can meet somebody in that place, that it is such a gift to them that I can't imagine that they wouldn't spread the word on that. It's like finding a reservoir of cool, pure water. You just start telling people, you got to go there. You got to go there.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah, there's just so much in the little words, "you are not alone," right? Those 4 little words. And there's so many aspects of whether it's postpartum depression or infertility or infant loss, that people feel so abandoned and unsupported.
I think it's interesting that you said you're not alone, because I think I read years and years and years and years and years ago in one of Rob Bell's books, and I think, this has stuck with me since, the 2 most healing words in the English language are me too. But I think that, sometimes in the therapeutic community and what we do, you can't say me too. You got to be careful with that.
Sure.
But you can always say you're not alone.
Yeah.
And I don't think people in particular are looking for a me too, but I do think they're looking for a, I got you. I'm with you. I'll walk beside you in this.
Yeah, because they're thinking, what about me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ooh, I wonder if the connection with your blog was a me too, and the connection with the practice is a you're not alone.
Oh, I like that.
That's a cool little transition.
Yeah.
So you've got the practice going now.
Yeah.
You're serving the birth community. Are people coming in for preconception counseling, I guess?
Yes, a little bit. Those are still my favorite clients if I had to choose, right? I love the couples who are eager to discuss expectations, and just like premarital couples, they are the most attuned and in love and ready and motivated to invest in their relationships or change if they need to, and taking advantage of that moment, not of them, but of that moment in their relationship is paramount, because Gottman, one of our faves, says 67% of relationships experience a decline in relational satisfaction after bringing the first baby home.
Wow.
So, and we see a trend in, they get very attuned and excited and in love right before the baby's born with all this expectation.
Not to mention hormones and
and then it just
things happening.
Literally plummets after they bring the baby home.
Wow.
So it's higher than higher than usual right beforehand, and then typically much, much lower, and then they don't know what to do after that.
Do you think that's the added stressor that's on it?
Oh, yeah. There's so many stressors, right? And then in this population, there's almost always multiple external stressors. So it's the phase of life where you move and get a bigger house. You might change jobs. Maybe you move closer to family. Money's typically tight, right?
Less sleep.
Yeah, there's multiple factors. Maybe one or both parents have jobs that require traveling. Maybe mom decides to quit her job and stay home. And then that's if everything goes right.
Yeah.
Right? And then, so if there's any health factors or mental health factors that either preclude or come after the birth, we just do a really terrible job as a culture preparing people for that. And the medical community is not very equipped, and then our family support systems are not well aware or educated in how to receive that or treat it.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating and needed that you said we don't do a great job of preparing people for that. I wrote down, you mentioned earlier you were blogging about your transition into motherhood, and I thought that phrasing was really interesting, because I think it does mark such different eras, experiences in a person's life.
Identities.
That I think literally, for the most part, society tells us, oh, your instincts will kick in and you'll figure it out.
That's right. And then when it doesn't, it must be
Shame.
me.
Oh, yeah, shame.
Yeah. I must be the difference between everyone else figuring this out and doing it right. And here I am suffering or not liking it, or, destruction really.
Yeah. Wow.
Really happens.
And I'm asking this genuinely, not leading at all. Is any of that related to cause of postpartum depression? Is that a biological thing? Is that an experience of, hey, I don't feel like I have this figured out, or it's not, I don't feel this magnetic pull towards my kid and I feel shame over it?
Oh, all of the above. Yeah. So we don't yet know, nobody yet knows exactly what causes postpartum depression. But we know what helps, right? So there are so many moving parts to that phase of life, and so many individual stories that we know there's hormones. We know there's a lot of biological craziness happening, and that's different. We know there's risk factors that increase your potential to get postpartum depression or postpartum anxiety or postpartum OCD, which also all exist.
Huh.
And so, if you've had mental illness in the past, if you have pretty much, honestly, whatever you would imagine being a stressor is a red flag, right? So if you just lost your job, if you just lost a loved one, if you have severe economic strife, all of those are going to be contributing factors that are going to raise your anxiety. And, anxiety and depression are like cousins.
Yeah. Kissing cousins.
Yeah. And so it is different than generalized anxiety or normal depression, I guess. Is that a phrase?
Yeah, normal, I would say that's like your circumstantial depression.
Yeah.
Like my girlfriend broke up with me.
Right.
So I'm depressed. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'd be depressed too,
Yeah. And this is treatable and temporary almost all of the time, but not without help. So unfortunately, it's about 20% of moms experience postpartum depression or perinatal mood disorders after childbirth, but only 15% of those seek help.
Wow.
So that's where the awareness is really critical, to be able to say, yeah, this is not normal. You are not the outlier. You can get treatment for this, and here's where you go, right? So that's how we have to equip people to know what is the referral pathway. Where do I even go for help? What's available? And that's why we exist.
Which is interesting, because I think that built into us, and this has got to be a societal, a media, probably entertainment kind of thing, we know where to go if we break a bone. We know where to go if we, I'm thinking of other civic offerings. If our house is on fire, if somebody broke
your car
in,
breaks
or
down. Yeah.
But like you said, this is a niche. This is a, which really it's not, according to your statistics, but for so long it's been viewed as a niche.
Yep.
And nobody, there hasn't been that John the Baptist preparing the way, shouting in the desert, saying, this is the way you can go for help. And I think it's so incredibly cool that you spotted that and you said, all right, I'm heading that way.
Thanks. Well, I needed it. I wish it existed 12 years ago.
Yeah.
To start our journey in, our therapist was awesome, but he definitely was like, I don't know, guys, what should we talk about?
Yeah.
I guess let's cover the stuff we did in premarital.
Well, and that's fascinating too. And I think I heard this in a sitcom once, but somebody said, you need a license to drive a car, but anybody can have a kid.
Yeah.
And it is interesting now that premarital is so built into the bones of
Yeah.
everybody as they're getting married. But I have literally, before the past 30 minutes, never heard of preconception counseling. And
Yeah.
I think that is something that is worth exploring if somebody wants to, well, steward their story well.
Right.
And the story of them transitioning into parenthood and bringing a kid into the world.
Yeah.
I can't think of anything that should be treated with more, sobriety and consideration than that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it really rocks your world for sure.
Wow. And so speaking of transitions, moving into what movie that you brought today.
Yeah.
What did you bring?
I brought Away We Go, which is a little bit of an older film. It was made in 2009. And why I chose it, this is interesting even to me, because when I pitched the idea to for that film to say, hey, let's watch Away We Go for my podcast episode, I had not seen it since I first watched it in 2009. I'd vaguely remembered it, and I knew it would be fitting for my practice of what I do now, so I connected those dots. But to be totally honest, I did not like the film back in 2009.
Yeah.
And so I was kind of like, ugh, I don't know if I should pick this one, even though I feel like it's a fit. And then my husband and I watched it together last week, and then I watched it one more time just last night, just to kind of freshen my brain up. And I really like it.
Yeah.
I love it now.
Have you read any of Dave Eggers' stuff? Like any of his books?
No.
So
and I'm familiar with him.
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I had forgotten that he wrote this with his wife.
Yeah.
I have only read one of his books, A Heartbreaking Work of Staggering Genius.
Right.
But that book, total mix of, what's the word? Autobiography and fiction.
Right. Right.
And so I kind of wondered watching this. Leigh-Ann and I watched it last night, kind of watching this, wondering, oh, I wonder if this is if there's any part of this is their journey.
And I think there's clearly ties. I have not read that book, but I know enough about it that he seems like Maya Rudolph's character to me a little bit. With
Potentially, with his parents.
With the parents, and a little bit of crossover there. So...
Yeah. So we watched it last night, and at the end of it, typically whenever we watch a movie, you know, for the show, one of us will look to the other. What'd you think? Mm-hmm. And then there's a podcast that we listen to called The Weekly Planet, which is two guys in Australia, and it's all about like comic book movies and TV shows and nerd stuff.
Cool.
Which is like, much like a tree, if you cut it, you can count its age by the rings. Like if you were to cut me, you would just see all the nerdy things that are inside. But they have a completely binary rating for movies. It's either the best movie ever or the worst movie ever, and there's nothing in between. Yeah. So last night, I was, hey, what did you think about this? She goes, yeah, best movie ever. Yeah, I liked it. What about you? I was like, worst movie ever. Yeah. But then, and we finished it at like 10. But then in the 12, 13 hours since, I've just kept churning and kept churning and kept churning. And I think a lot like Karin and I, in her episode, talked about terms of endearment. And I said one of the most interesting things about that movie is there's not really a story thread that goes throughout it. It's very loose. It was much more, let's create these characters and see what they do. Yeah. I kind of felt like this was that as well.
Interesting.
It was like a character piece of, let's create clearly defined characters. And then, except with this one, let's put them on a journey and see what shakes out.
Yeah. It definitely, what stands out to me every time I've seen it is it has to be one of the very, very few movies where the woman is pregnant the entire movie and you do not see her give birth.
Yeah.
you don't experience it, so it kind of leaves you hanging. Like,
It's like a No Country for Old Men. Like, wait, that's the ending?
right.
That anticlimactic, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah. It doesn't necessarily feel like the ending.
Yeah, I liked the conversation that they had on the trampoline at the end. I liked the conversation they had on the porch at the end. I think it was an interesting, like to talk about No Country for Old Men again. I felt like that was a movie where there was this larger story and you got a sliver of the middle. You didn't get the beginning, you didn't get the end, you just got that middle part. And I felt like this was something similar.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that.
To where clearly Bert and Verona, whose name I only remember because I bought that coffee yesterday from Starbucks.
Nice.
Clearly they had existed before the story of the movie started.
Yeah.
And it felt like clearly they will continue on afterwards. And those kinds of movies, I think for me personally, I never like at the beginning. I never like upon first viewing. But I didn't like No Country for Old Men. I remember in the theater when the lights came back up going, oh,
that's not a story. Yeah.
And then it just kept turning in my brain, like those rock polishing kits you got when you were a kid, when you visited the museum. So it starts, Bert and Verona are living in Colorado. And they are going to have dinner with his parents. Super weirdos, I thought.
Yes.
Which Catherine O'Hara, great
goodness.
at playing super weirdos.
Yeah.
So perfect casting there. Oh, interesting thread. Karin's episode, Terms of Endearment.
Jeff Daniels.
Yeah, he's in this one as well.
He is.
It's like 6 degrees of Jeff Daniels over here.
Know.
They go have dinner with him, and you could tell some tension when they showed up. The mom lays on the couch and puts her head on Verona's belly.
Right. Yes.
To listen to the baby. They sit down for dinner and they clearly have something that they want to say. They dance around for a bit, but they say, we're moving.
Yeah. Out of the country.
Yeah. Yeah, for 2 years. And so they're going to miss the grandchild.
Yeah. They say we're going to move in June. And he's like, you're moving a month before the baby arrives. And they, just in the scene before, Verona had, had been telling her sister, we're going to lean on them heavily. So that definitely wasn't their plan,
So it's like a support system gets kicked out from underneath them. Yes.
And by choice, right? Like by the grandparents' choice.
Yes. And what's strange is, having seen the end of the movie. Oh, by the way, spoiler alert, I guess.
Right.
If
Go watch the movie.
You haven't seen it yet. But by the end of the movie, you understand where she is coming from with her parents having died. And so I could only imagine being where they're at, knowing that there's not a parental resource on that side. After that scene, they talk about the only reason why they moved to Colorado was the parents.
Yeah.
I can only imagine that news just being a, red flashing light, alert, alert, alert.
I mean, insulting, right?
Insulting?
Yeah.
I didn't think that. Tell me about that.
We moved here to be closer to you. Now we're having your, I guess it wouldn't be their only grandchild, right? Because his brother has a daughter, but they clearly live far away. We're having this baby. They seem extremely excited about the baby. In fact, right before they announce they're going to move, Verona and Bert are kind of pumping the brakes on who's invited into the delivery room, right?
Yeah.
Hey, just so you know, we're talking about our birth plan. We're not going to be. We don't want you to bring the video recorder, Dad. Okay, no problem. That kind of thing.
And that's where I think they could sense things were getting weird because they took that in
way
really
too
easily. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And so I think insulting from Verona and Bert's perspective, because it's like, and now you decide to put yourself first.
I get
Mom
that
and
now.
Dad, right?
Yeah.
But this comes up really often in sessions with my clients who are transitioning into parenthood is we forget, and I've been guilty of this as well, we forget that our parents are also transitioning roles, right, into becoming grandparents. Even if they have been grandparents, they haven't grandparented this child before.
Yeah.
And clearly this was a season in their life for them they were very excited about. She said, we've been thinking about this for 15 years. So I think they were maybe even, I wonder, after Bert and Verona left that dinner, what happened with the grandparents in bed that night talking about, man, they weren't happy for us at all.
Yeah. Yeah, because I felt like, if I would have been in Bert or Verona's seat during that conversation, that I would have thought, well, I don't think that they thought much about us in this plan. It seems like they're just going after what they wanted.
It does.
Yeah. Yeah, I get the insulting now, especially if I feel like it's a secondary emotion, because I think there's probably definitely so much fear underneath.
Oh, yeah.
Utter panic. But I could definitely see in that moment going, wait a minute. We came here for you. What are you talking about? You're leaving.
We were ready to tell you no. You don't get to tell us no.
Yeah, yeah. You're breaking up with me. I'm breaking up with you.
Exactly.
You can't fire me. I quit.
Bingo.
So they, in this spot of, well, the only tie that we had to this geographic location is now leaving, kind of decide, well, then if we're not tied here anymore, let's figure out where we want to be tied to.
Away we go.
Yeah,
right?
which I think is a great, it's a great place to be at. I think, I tell people all the time, the way that I got into the therapist's chair was by being on the client's couch. And a lot of my work, I remember this revelation when I was in therapy myself that, my life, I can create my life. I have agency over deciding what it is, what it can be. And the language that shook out in for me personally was, life doesn't have to suck.
Wow.
And it, and that was, I was 33, 34 years into life before I realized that. And so I think that that's an interesting spot for these characters to be in as they're getting ready to welcome a baby in.
Yeah.
And so they start this journey, which, I'm sure we could break up into acts or at least sections, but because it's done with title cards, of going to different locations around the continent where they have different relationships.
Right.
And I was kind of wondering at the end of it last night, is it that they go to each relationship and location because there's something that they need to learn and they learn it from those people? Is that the story, or is the story just we're connecting with all these different people who we thought had it all together and we're going to go to them for one reason or another? And now we found out that they don't have it all together.
Right.
But
a little bit of both, maybe,
Probably.
They're definitely seeking out something, hope and help.
Yeah. Man, and who isn't?
Right. Preach.
So they head to Arizona first?
Yep, Phoenix first. Her sister lives there. And then
I forgot about the
coworkers, ex-coworkers or former coworkers, Allison Janney.
Yeah, I kind of thought that was
Gaffigan.
like her boss that she reported to, since her job was not location-based.
Okay.
So they head there. She connects with her sister, but they spend most of the time with Allison Janney and Jim Gaffigan.
Right, who's in the most unfunny role of his life, right?
Yeah. I read something on IMDb that they mimicked a joke of his, though. Oh, the seahorse thing. That's a joke in one of his stand-up routines.
Yeah, okay.
About a scientist, it's the male seahorse that gives birth. And he just misidentified what the gender of the seahorse was, but he doubles down. Yeah, nope, that's the male. That's the male. So they go there, and what they experience, I think, is definitely I don't fully know what the word vivacious means, but certainly like energetic couple.
Very, yeah. Well, Alice and Janney, for sure.
Yeah. But I think that
she has enough energy for both of them, I guess.
But I think that they ultimately leave going, that's not it.
Yeah, that's
not
not
what we want.
Mm-mm.
And you see her interacting with their kids, insulting both of them.
Terrible.
To not to their face, really to the backs of their heads. Talking about them while they're there.
Definitely not the kind of parents we want to become. That's what I feel like they're thinking.
Yeah, and it almost seems like they don't really, I don't know if it's that they don't like being parents, but they're disconnected from the experience of being parents.
Mm-hmm. They resent it, is the vibe I get.
Okay. Yeah, well, these kids are the ankle monitors that are attached to us now, so we'll just have to learn to live with them.
Yep, and joke about it because we don't know how to cope.
Yeah, or maybe even we don't know how to experience our own feelings. And, I wonder if it's that they don't know, or they don't feel like they have a right to feel angry, or maybe they don't have an ability to grieve the loss of their quote unquote like freedom or ability to all that kind of stuff, and so they're just taking it out passive aggressively on. Yeah,
well, and I think it's Alice and Jan even says, we really want you to move here because we haven't made a lot of friends, right? It seems cliquish. We didn't get into the good club, and we, so definite disconnection from a value of relationships or relationship building, or
and I get the sense that that's a very misery loves company kind of thing. So like I get the sense of, and maybe Bert and Verona thought the same thing, when you come in, they're like misery magnets. When you come in proximity of them, they're going to pull you down to where they're at.
Oh yeah.
Rather than
nobody wants to be around that.
Yeah. I had a buddy one time who told me that he and his wife had been hanging out with a couple who, not at the beginning, but they turned into this very negative, and he found that he was going that same way. Yeah. And then when he was around the husband of the other couple, that he would find himself joking in different ways, talking about different things, and just being overall negative. And I said, oh, it's like you were trying to connect with him, but you were trying to build a bridge from his side instead of yours.
Interesting. Yeah.
It's you were trying to go where he was at instead of allowing him, hey, I'm sorry to hear that you're feeling that way.
Yeah, come on over to my side. Yeah.
So they leave there. Oh gosh, Arizona, Montreal,
Madison.
Yes.
Cannot forget Maggie Gyllenhaal in Madison.
Which he said, I believe, her parents were friends of his parents, and they just called them cousins growing up.
Right.
Yeah. So he shows up. She teaches at a university. Or
apparently.
She's in some kind of office or something.
It seemed like,
And she's breastfeeding both of her children. Yeah. One who is a baby, the other who is probably 5-ish.
Yeah.
Yeah. When they... it's a kid that's dressed
culturally uncomfortable age, right?
Yeah.
Let's say that.
Yeah.
Without judgment upon it, culturally uncomfortable.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Absolutely. I'm going to make a joke, but because of your specialty and population, I want to be sensitive to it. The thought just came up, like, if your kid's old enough to walk into McDonald's and order,
right,
probably it's safe to discontinue.
I'm thinking
breastfeeding. But I'm not judging how somebody lives their life. This is played up for laughs, so it's different.
Exactly. And it is a very comical moment. I mean, she's over the top about it, so it's presented even. Would
you say that her and her family are the opposite of Alice and Janney and Jim Gaffigan?
Yes.
I didn't think about that until
That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So you go from one extreme to the other. You go from people who very much would like to push their kids away to somebody whose guiding philosophy is no strollers because I don't want to push my kids away from me.
No strollers, no. Well, what was the other one? Yeah.
Sitters, maybe?
I think I even wrote it down.
It was 3 S's. I remember
Yes.
that. Oh.
Separation.
Okay.
There you go. Separation, sugar, and strollers.
Yeah.
They're very other end of the spectrum.
Yeah. Which is, I listened to an episode of This American Life last week. The title of it was Unconditional Love. They recycled a story I'd heard before about a family who has a son who has autism, who is much larger than them. And so the question of that story was, is love in this case keeping him with us where we are literally physically getting injured? Or is it finding a facility for him that can give him the round-the-clock attention that he needs to be able to operate? They concluded there.
Yeah.
That's the second story in it. The first story was about a couple who adopted a kid from Romania who his behavior got so bad they were calling it psychotic. He was trying to hurt his mom. She purposefully didn't teach him how to read because right around then Columbine had happened and she was afraid if he got that information, what he would do with it. They used attachment therapy, not attachment theory, which they said was very controversial because it was basically causing a child to regress back to where they would literally need the parent for sustenance in life.
Wow.
Stuff like smothering kids with blankets, like that kind of thing, and kids had died from it. But they talked about kind of through that. It was stuff like getting the kid to literally never be apart from the mom for more than 3 minutes, I think.
Wow.
Like holding her pocket while he's that kind of thing. Hers, it felt very much like that kind of thing. Like, we don't want our children to ever physically be apart from us. We don't ever want them to move in that direction. And that is the type of love that we're gonna run with. Which is in stark contrast to the first family that they met up with.
Right.
And I think with Bert and Verona, I don't know. If I was them, I don't know. I was going to say maybe I could take something from each of these families that they're meeting. I don't know what I would take from the first family, though.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Well, a long list of what not to do, right?
Maybe.
Not what not to be or...
I wonder if there's a certain just being comfortable with being yourself. But I guess if yourself is a terrible person, I don't know if that's the way that you want to go.
And then the dinner scene with Maggie Gyllenhaal and her husband or lover, I guess, and their children, Bert outright just gets to the end of his rope and is like, you are a terrible person.
Yeah.
You're terrible people.
Yeah.
And he just kind of storms around and then gets the stroller and
strolls their kid around, and she is just losing her mind at that thought.
Yeah, it's pretty hysterical.
I think it's interesting that Maggie Gyllenhaal and her crew and they're so, I don't know what the right word is, free thinking. I don't know if that's a right classification for this, but they're certainly so open to what we're doing and practicing is different than what a lot of people are, but at the same time so close-minded because she comes down so judgmentally on Bert and Verona for nearly everything that they talk about in what they're going through on their parenthood journey. In your practice, do you find a lot of couples experiencing something similar? Like they're trying to figure it out, but everybody around them is talking to them like they're doing it wrong.
Absolutely. I mean, there's mommy shaming left and right, working mom, stay-at-home mom, breastfeeding, formula, birth at home, birth in the hospital. I mean, anywhere you turn where there's going to be a decision, there's going to be controversy.
Yeah.
And so, we don't here at Readiness Counseling don't have a bias or give you advice of what to choose. But I think what the simple step people often skip is what questions can you ask, and are you confident in those questions to even be able to evaluate what may or may not be best for your family? So, and then to remove some of the stigma of either our macro culture, or their own family culture, such as, well, my mom never breastfed, so I'm not going to, right? Well, what do you know about breastfeeding? What makes that?
What do you know about your mom's experience?
Yeah.
Was she able to?
Right. Was that positive or negative? Did she feel that way because she wasn't given an option? You might have options, or, I'm going to go to a hospital because that's what my husband wants me to do. Or, okay, do you have the correct information on what's available and what could be a really positive experience? And then can we take those expectations and give you a comfortable malleability about those expectations, because nothing is going to be exactly plotted perfectly, right? Planned for.
My joke with Leigh-Ann, whenever it comes to any ideas or planning that I have, is I don't always accomplish this for the longest time, to say this is an open-handed plan, because I just recognize I might be thinking that something's going to go this way, but rarely does anything ever.
Yeah.
So as much as I can get a handle on it, I'll say this is it, but I'm also realizing, well, my hands aren't closed and there's no way I can really close them on it.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to try to keep walking forward. And having those questions to pose to somebody seems like a really great resource to give to the couple that's pursuing.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say that, I'm a friend, I'm a family member of a couple who is pursuing that. What are some ways that I can support them, be there for them, maybe offer any experience, which I don't have any experience, we don't have kids, but like for the other people, without coming down as that kind of judgmental, kind of I know better, do it this way because it's the right way?
Well, this is going to sound like a very therapeutic response, but 2 tiny phrases is, tell me more and how can I help? Right? That's going to be, tell me more. How do you decide about that? How do you know to ask that question? What's that been like for you? Tell me more, right? That we have an approach of curiosity rather than being accusatory. Like, oh, that sounds terrible. Oh, you're going to do that, which clearly has some judgment in the tone, or at least some doubt. And then just how can I help is so simple, but we don't necessarily know if this person needs a hug or a casserole, and whether it's, we're talking a lot about kind of the birth and delivery perinatal season, but the other arm of our practice is infertility and loss. And those are far more uncomfortable for the friends, the family, the kind of second or third tier supporters that really don't know what to say, right? They really don't know how to help and aren't sure how to even ask, how can I help?
Yeah, and I think even though there have been so few times that I've had to be there for somebody experiencing something like that, it makes me think of just other tragedies and sad circumstances, in that if I myself as a person am uncomfortable with my sadness, with my grief, with my anger, or handling any feeling, it's going to make it to where I'm not going to be able to be there for somebody else experiencing it. It's a very transitive property kind of thing.
Totally.
And I always think about, when I was in those spots as a person who, I was just experiencing something beyond my ability to cope at the time. What is it that I needed? What is it that I wanted? a lot of times it was just I needed the presence of another person
That's
with me.
right.
And so I think about one of my groomsmen, Eric, whenever I was in San Diego and he was still up in Orange County, and the girl I was dating broke up with me. We were an hour and 15 apart with no traffic.
Right. I'm like, what day was that?
Yeah,
You were an
and
hour.
I
15.
and I called him crying, just saying, hey, she broke up with me. And his first words were literally, "Okay, I'll be there in an hour."
Nice.
And he got in the car and he drove, and he was with me the whole weekend. And a lot of the times we just sat and watched Lost and didn't talk a ton. But I think back to that. And that's one of the reasons why he was one of my groomsmen, because he's that guy where when I needed someone, it wasn't a bunch of questions.
Right.
It wasn't
we're not problem solving.
Let me get back to you when I can. It was, okay, I'll be there in an hour.
Cool.
And he was there. And I just think, a lot of times when people are going through stuff, you don't need an answer.
That's right.
You just need to be there.
Yeah. We don't need problem solving during grief.
And I wonder if a lot of the times it's, the person who is trying to support feeling fear because they don't have an answer. And so they think, because I don't have an answer, I can't be there.
Yeah.
But
I don't know what to do. I don't have the words. I'm helpless.
Yeah.
I'm just going to burden them further is the lie.
Yeah. But to just be there and hold them if they need it, if they'll let you, if that's where they're at, or if nothing else, sit on the couch across from them.
Yeah, man.
And let them know you're not alone. Is such a blessing. It's a gift.
And it's a huge component of therapy, right?
Yeah.
That, if we did, I don't want to put myself out of a job, but honestly, if we did relationships right, they wouldn't need us.
Oh,
right?
yeah. No, I tell clients all the time, hey, my job is to work myself out of a job.
Yeah.
It's not to teach you to be dependent upon me. It's to teach you how to form healthy, emotional, lasting bonds, so that in the end of it, you can process what you need to process inside yourself, because it's that relationship with yourself as well. Mm-hmm. How do you get that healthy relationship with yourself so that you can have a relationship with others?
Yep.
Because I'm not going to be around forever. I'm a finite person, and to teach you to depend on me is just not realistic. It's not healthy. It's not helping you.
It's unsustainable.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So they. Who was the second one?
So then they go to Montreal.
So we've gone to Arizona, we've gone to Wisconsin with Maggie Gyllenhaal, and they were like, this isn't it either.
Right.
So they go to Montreal, which is, who was in Montreal?
So former college classmates, friends from college.
Yes.
Chris Messina.
Yeah. And
the wife, I don't
Melanie
know.
Linsky, who was Rose on 2.5 Men. I know she's been around in so many other films, but that's the thing that sticks out. I'm so sorry.
No. I know her recently from Castle Rock. I think she was on that Stephen King.
She was in an old movie with Kate Winslet, smoking something.
Yeah. Oh, man.
Can't think of the name of it.
Nope. By the way, speaking of other amazing actresses, Carmen Hijogo, who plays Grace, the sister, I think that's her name, is now in True Detective that just wrapped up, the most recent season of True Detective with Mahershala Ali.
Yeah.
Phenomenal. So she's kind of a blip in this film, just, side character. But man, she's a powerhouse actress for sure. So look her up, you cinephile friends.
He's somebody that I've grown to love a lot too, and I'd have never thought that he would have gotten to where he's at, because I originally saw him on a show on USA called The 4400.
Oh yeah,
which was a sci-fi show. But watching him in Moonlight was like, good night.
Now he's A-lister.
Yeah, well, Oscar.
Far.
So from Green Book.
But yeah, so now they're headed to Montreal.
So and I can't, the only part of that one that sticks out to me is the discussion between Bert and him when they're in that club. I can't remember what happens before.
Yeah, so, here's what's interesting for me personally. So when we saw this as a couple in 2009, when it came out, we would have been expecting our first daughter. And like I said, I remember leaving that and really not liking that movie. And I really think it was, and Josh, my husband, and I talked about it after we rewatched it. I think it was this city, this couple scene, you know. And so they walk in and they see this really kind of utopia of parenting, right? Where they've adopted all these kids of
and they're singing
diversity, and they're singing from Sound of Music. And it's very like, even Verona is like, I love that. Like all these different children, and they're all just laying all over each other, loving on each other. And they're clearly from different nationalities and backgrounds, and, you know, and even just kind of funky. Like there's one girl with a crazy clown wig on, you know, and just kind of eccentric and loving, right? And it does have a very warm quality to it. Like, oh, they clearly have got this figured out, right? And so they very quickly are like, I think we're going to move to Montreal. And then they go out, the four of them, the two couples go out on the town, and they're like, is this common for you? You know, you have a lot of kids. And I don't even know how many kids they have, but they're like, yeah, I think we go out a lot, actually. And then it cuts to, you know, they're getting dinner, and Chris Messina gives the example of pouring syrup over the little house he builds, saying that it takes love, right? It takes a lot of love and patience.
Weird metaphor. I didn't quite know where he was going to go,
home,
but
and, you know, building a home together.
Basically, love is going to tie you together.
Yeah, and Bert and Verona talk about why or how they're not ever going to get married, right? That Verona does not value marriage, or does not want to ever marry Bert. And then they're kind of back at a club where it's kind of like an amateur dance place.
Yeah,
it's really
it was
weird.
Instead of karaoke, it's
dance, but
I almost thought stripping because there was a pole, but that didn't happen.
But then, she has her clothes on the whole time. And her name, I think it was Munchie, something was her name. It was a really weird. I had to look it up because I didn't know what her character's name was. And Verona have a conversation where Verona is saying, "Yeah, we didn't really try. We didn't really plan on getting pregnant." And you can see in Munchie's face, it's like just flat affect. And her next question is, it's, have you had any problems so far?
To Verona,
which when you then find out she's had 5 miscarriages makes a lot of sense, right? That instead of, oh, wow, are you excited? Or how's the morning sickness been? Or anything, you know, it's, have you had any problems so far? And Verona said, no, not really. You know, and you can almost just see the jealousy.
Yeah, I wonder if the flat affect was she had to disassociate.
Yeah, absolutely.
To survive in that moment.
Self-preservation.
Yeah, and then the question, you know, the problems are she's trying to connect back in.
Yeah.
But because her experience...
Totally.
Well, she hasn't been able to experience parenthood biologically so far. She was looking for her in.
Yeah, and then you find out in the next scene, you know, Chris Messina tells, or his name is Tom, this character name, tells Bert, John Krasinski, that she just had a miscarriage last Thursday.
Yeah.
And that it was her 5th.
Yeah.
And I don't know why, but at the time in my life when I first saw that, it was so disturbing to me that amount of pain and emotion, that someone's happiness was so contingent upon that life phase. And since then, I have experienced a miscarriage myself.
Mm.
And so now rewatching it, I see so much more honesty and just distance in the woman who was myself, knew, like, just kind of went through a little bit of infertility, you know, kind of a longer conception period, and then pregnant, and watched that movie.
You were Verona the first time you watched
Yeah.
it. And then the second time you were...
Multiple perspectives. Yeah. Certainly. At least having, at least a taste of what Munchie has experienced. And also knowing the joys of parenthood.
Yeah.
The reality of all of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That for me was the most powerful scene in the whole movie.
Yeah.
And I think on a million different levels, you know, one of them, we were just talking about Melanie Linsky's character, you know, disassociating and asking questions about problems. Alexei Murdoch is the musician whose music is just, I mean, it's everywhere in the movie.
Yep.
And the lyrics to his song, while she was dancing, it was stuff, the lyrics were stuff about feeling so alone.
Yeah.
Feeling like people have left. And I really, even watching that, was thinking, you know, this is her character communicating wordlessly.
Exactly.
How empty and alone she feels having gone through that. And then without a change in, you know, location, lighting, music, anything, when Chris Messina starts, really it felt like out of nowhere in that scene.
Yeah, it was extremely vulnerable, and because at first you think maybe he's just embarrassed of her, you know, like she's up on the stage and she's really
they didn't know where she was,
yeah,
and then all of a sudden she's up there,
and she's just like pitifully, very melancholy, you know, dancing around this pole, and not in a sexual way, and just like a really. It's sad.
Yeah, and even after, you know, the end of the movie, this scene stuck because he talked about the miscarriages and he said, what do you even do? Do you name them? Do you bury them?
Yeah.
You know, that kind of thing. I remember I had a theology professor in college who, teaching theology at a Bible college, especially one that has no association with the denomination, I could only imagine as being the most difficult job. Because there were times where people would stand up on opposite sides of the room and scream at each other.
Oh my.
Over various issues. But I remember we talked about God's grace versus God's justice, you know, versus his holiness. And he brought up, you know, what happens with babies who don't make it. And he said, this is one of the only times I'm going to tell you my personal opinion in this theology class, because it's not my job to teach you my opinion. It's my job to teach you the curriculum. But he said, I am the father to 2 daughters. He said, who are here right now. I am the father to 5 kids total.
Wow.
And he said, I would not be able to remain upright if I didn't trust that God in his mercy greeted, you know, my 3 babies into heaven, and that one day, you know, I will be able to walk up to them and introduce myself and say, I am so glad to meet you, and I've missed you so much, and I can't believe that you're here. And he said even his oldest daughter then, they were told when she was still in the womb that she would be deformed, you know, beyond recognition when she was born, and that they would be better to end the pregnancy. And they chose to continue. And he said she was born the most perfect little baby you've ever seen.
Wow.
You know, and
yeah.
and so just you know, Chris Messina's that little bit of feeling that he let out in that,
Yeah.
well, that lot of it, but he let out in that little bit of time.
Right.
You know, I think it has just stuck with me so much.
Yeah, and he said, you know, you watch these babies grow and then fade. And I thought, oh. It's just gutting, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so sad. And I think that lacks the concrete hope and knowledge that your professor spoke to, right?
Yeah.
That, yes, there is a fading of, you know, your heart sinks. But I personally would agree I couldn't, my faith resonates in my hope and knowledge to meet my baby we named Brave again. Absolutely.
Yeah, I remember in school when we were in, I think it was marital life cycle, we just talked about the different stages of a person's development in life, and how if a parent loses a child, that's not
Right.
the way things are designed to go. It's supposed to be the kid buries the parent. And so it ends up turning into a double grief, because you're obviously grieving the loss of this person that you held dear, but you also have to come to terms with and recognize and grieve the loss of your hopes and dreams,
Right.
both for them and for their future, and how those are very much not just for them, but they're for you as well.
Yes.
You know, I dreamed of being a grandparent. I dreamed of, you know, being able to coordinate my kid's wedding and all the other things, and how grief is such a tough thing to do singularly, but to do it doubly for that is so much tougher.
Yeah. Yeah, we so at Readiness Counseling we hold a free loss group twice a month for those that have experienced loss through conception, pregnancy, childbirth, infertility, what have you. And so I have the privilege of hearing multiple difficult loss stories regularly, and seeing people journey through that. And again, then trying to, outside of that group, equip our community and our second, third tier support, you know, system with the language and words and ability, really, education of just being able to engage in that. Because I really do believe it's a myth to find closure within grief, you know, that our society, especially with miscarriage and infant loss, are like, okay, that's very uncomfortable. Let's tie that up in a nice bow. And now that you've had another baby, you should be good, right?
Yeah.
Now that you know you can get pregnant, you know.
But it's not cashing in a warranty on a phone that doesn't work and just getting a phone that replaces it. It's not.
No.
That's not it.
No. And so just validating that consistently forever, right?
Yeah.
For that couple, for that family.
Well, it's one of the things, and I think even reflecting on my professor, my undergrad story, as I was talking about it, that I think he did so beautifully is he didn't get over anything. He may have gotten through something, but he didn't get over anything.
That's right.
And it's not about forgetting or putting it out of your mind.
Right.
It's not about that. It's about, I like what he said about remaining upright. But I also, when he said, I couldn't remain upright without the hope.
Yeah.
I think
meaning making, right?
It's not about closing that book. I think it displays in a person so much more strength to walk forward with that book still open, and that hope still alive, while still being a person.
Yeah.
That I can't imagine something or someone who would be stronger than that. Certainly, you're going to come out different. but to know that it's okay to grieve, and it's okay to grieve and still have hope, which
Yeah.
I would imagine is advanced level, PhD level grief, because at the beginning, I don't know if that's within reach. I think it would be so difficult. And obviously, I don't have the experience of a miscarriage, but I think about the things that I have grieved, losses of my own hopes and dreams or loved ones.
Sure.
You know, at the beginning, you can't see the hope.
Yeah.
The fog is too thick, and sometimes you need somebody to help you see the headlights of the fog through the mist.
Yeah. Well said. Yeah. And I like to tell, this is kind of a common phrase I use regularly with our lost clients, is it's okay to make other people uncomfortable. And I saw Tom do that to Bert, you know, that he needed to be able to make him uncomfortable. And he was. Bert did not know what to say, but he was so empathetic in that moment, even in his silence.
Yeah. Well, he was there with him.
Yeah.
Which is what Tom needed in that moment.
Yep. Because clearly he had not dumped that recently. You know,
Yeah.
I think it was probably the first person he told that she had just had another miscarriage on Thursday, you know, to be that like recent.
Well, how in the world they were even present enough to smile and make jokes when they first showed up? Because I just think if Leigh-Ann and I experienced something like that, I know me personally, I would be in shock for weeks, months, you know. Well, I wanna be cognizant of the time. They leave, I think, Montreal, go to Miami, and meet with his brother. Which was not
planned. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, because his brother called him, which this was so weird. He called him, and then to take the call, Bert went under the bed that Verona was asleep on. And I just thought, were you trying to not wake her up?
He's a quirky guy. Yeah.
So they go there because his wife just left. And the thing that made me think of that was you talking about Bert being so uncomfortable in that moment with him there. Then he goes to his brother whose wife had just left. And then Verona at one point while they're there comes out and she finds him, and he's in this state of panic.
Yeah.
Because he is now, through the empathy that I think he was able to offer in Montreal and in Miami, come to the place where he is afraid that maybe she'll leave, maybe the baby, you know, something will happen.
Yeah, if she hasn't married me by now, what's my guarantee?
So, and so he's just in his fear at that moment. And I think it's interesting that happens after he encounters these two losses.
True, yeah.
Yeah, because I think maybe it's even though even in the movie we had seen him experience loss, you know, his parents aren't going to be there for the birth.
Sure.
But I think this is really where his rubber is able to meet the road, where he really realizes, oh, this is where we're at, and this is a possibility.
Yeah. I need you.
And I need to reckon with this, and I need my safe harbor. I need my anchor, you know. And he turns to her again and asks her to marry him, and she says never.
Never. Right.
Yeah, and I mean, even then, I think the scene keeps going, but even then I just think, he runs up against these two losses, and then he reaches out, and for her to say never, I just thought, oh, gosh.
Yes, but then they have, you know, which personally is sad to me because I love marriage and value it deeply, but
I'm a big proponent.
Yeah, totally. But they do have what I would call like their trampoline vows, right?
Yes.
And so then they go,
to? I do.
Do you promise to do this? And some are silly, but all have deep meaning.
Yeah.
And they really kind of got married on that trampoline then, in a way, in their own way.
I think they reckoned with and decided on certainly a deeper level of commitment that maybe, at least in their world, wasn't what everybody else would have said you should do.
Right.
Yeah. But for them, it worked.
Yeah.
And then they travel from there. So it's kind of put out that her parents had died. And the reason why she doesn't want to get married is because they can't be at the ceremony.
Right.
Which, afterwards, in talking with Leigh-Ann, I was like, I could get not wanting to have a ceremony because they can't be there, but still wanting to get married. So have it go to a justice of the peace, you know.
And maybe I would believe I would hope kind of her having a daughter would eventually change that, right?
Yeah. But to see that she's still in her grief, she is still reckoning with the loss, which was it 10 years before that? I can't quite remember.
Yeah, she was 22 when they died. And I think she said she was 34. So about 12 years.
Yeah.
So 10, 12 years.
But she was still dealing with the fallout of that, which I think, to someone who is maybe experiencing grief now, you're going to see movies or television shows that give you a formula for how long it should last. I remember a silly ski movie I saw a long time ago called Out Cold, where they said, how many weeks was the relationship? That's how many weeks you can grieve.
Oh,
and
gosh.
then you got to put it behind you. To anybody that's going to tell you that, there's no right amount of time.
Nope.
There's no right process.
Nope.
There is just doing it.
Yeah.
And you don't have to do it alone.
That's right.
But there's no formula. So know that. And I think the last scene where they go to her parents' house, where her sister at the beginning had said, "When's the last time you've been there?"
Yeah.
They go there and they sit and they watch the ocean. You get the feeling that having been in these two spots prior where they were encountering this grief, this is the first time she has made a conscious decision and to engage in her own.
Yeah.
And so it's her literally beginning the process of sitting in her grief.
Yeah.
And beginning that.
Yeah. And he says, this place is perfect for us.
Yeah.
Right. And it's, clearly not just the location. It's this season of life, this place, this where we are, where our relationship is right now. And she says, I sure hope so. Right.
Yeah. I get the sense that they ended up in a place where they were more accepting of themselves than at the beginning. They were okay with, and I think it could have come from, maybe at the beginning of each of the places they went to, they entered into it thinking, well, these guys have it all together. So we got to figure out how we get it together like them. And at the end, they realized, well, none of them had it all together.
Yeah.
They just seemed like they did. And since we don't have it all together, I think we'll be okay.
Right. Yeah, because that was kind of the initial question was, did we mess up our lives? We have a broken window and we're 33 and we don't even know how to do basic life.
Yeah.
Maybe we need to figure this out, and then to realize they end up in a house with, I'm sure, have broken windows, right? It looked pretty run down. And that's going to be perfect for them.
Yeah. But it's not necessarily the house that makes it perfect. It's we're okay.
Yep.
Not our circumstances, not our location, but, even though it's going to be tough, we have what it takes to make it. Which I think is such a beautiful message. And I know that as a past client and a present therapist, a gift that I have received from a therapist and that I try to give my clients to let them know, you have what it takes to make it. You have made it. This isn't an imaginary skill that we're trying to pull out of you.
Yeah.
It's something that you have.
I can't make up resiliency.
Yeah.
That's all you.
Yeah. So let me help you highlight the battles that you've already won. And let me let you know that you're not, I tell my clients, you're going to quit before I do. So I'm always going to be in the office, in the chair, waiting on you to join me. And I want you to know that I'm going to be here.
Cool.
Yeah. It was it's another one where I didn't like it when I got done with it, and now I love it. So
Oh, good. Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, it took me a few viewings and a lot of life to kind of come around and be like, oh, there's a lot of layers here. And Sam Mendes directed it.
Who would have thought?
Right?
Yeah.
Way different. And yet you could see.
And now he's done Bond.
Crazy, right? Yeah. I mean, what a timely, it's a snapshot of 2009 though, with Alexi Murdoch soundtrack. And I do feel like there's a lot of those sweet, folksy indie elements that were very
It's a
popular.
little Garden State. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Kind of in the same era.
Yeah.
As that. Well, Emily, let's say that somebody was listening to this and they felt like they could really connect with you, or they're in a spot where they're considering starting a family, or maybe they have suffered a loss. A, how can they get some resources that could help? And B, how could they reach out and potentially contact and come to Ready Nest, or maybe even see you?
Yeah, thanks. So our website is readynestcounseling.com, and you can fill out the contact form there and reach out directly, and we'll make sure you get connected to not just me, but a right fit for your needs. So whether that is one of our Ready Nest counselors, happy to connect you to that. We have locations in Nashville, Donaldson, and now Clarksville. But also, we're very well connected in the community to just local resources. So maybe you don't need a therapist, and we are not going to string you along. Maybe you already have a therapist that you love, but they don't necessarily know how to treat this specific season that you're in. So we can consult with your current therapist. We can sometimes will do maybe just 2 or 3 sessions and have you sign a waiver, which allows us to talk to your therapist to really maximize, give you well-rounded care. Or maybe you need like a lactation consultant or a doula, or you're looking for a new birth center, OBGYN, or you have questions about what a midwife is, or et cetera, et cetera. The list goes on. So we're connected to a lot of resources in the birth community, as well as then there's infertility resources. Loss doesn't have as many resources, but there are bereavement doulas. There are bereavement photographers, which will take photos in the hospital for free if you have a stillbirth. And we just want you to feel surrounded by love and community, to know you're not alone. That's why we have 2 free loss. Well, we have the 2 free loss groups a month. And then we have another free group for new moms weekly, every week at 1 on Wednesdays. So if you're prenatal, postpartum, you can bring your lap baby, just with you and connect with other moms. And we just want to help you connect the dots to help you find.
Yeah. So, I mean, it really sounds like
need.
if they have any questions about the
Yeah,
birth
the whole
era
scope.
at all, that you guys would be a great resource to reach out to.
I hope so. Yeah, that's the idea. We want to help fill that gap.
Wow.
You bet.
Well, thank you so much for welcoming me in and being able to be with us. It's been so great.
Awesome.
Nice. Pre-interview banter.
It's getting worse every time.
I didn't
Not
know that.
ours,
I
but
didn't know that was possible.
when I listen to the pre-edited version, there's been several in a row where you talk about the pre-interview banter as you know what I mean? Like as the pre-interview banter.
Yeah. One of these days, during the pre-interview banter portion, I'll just tell everybody where my treasure is, but they won't even know because I've laid all these breadcrumbs out the whole time. They'll just be thinking, oh, I'm just listening to chatter, when really I'm giving the location of my treasure.
It's right here.
Yeah, which right now is on the couch in our living room.
It's me, guys. Not our dog.
But also I do have a treasure that's several $1 million worth of money.
Better not be. Let's pay our student loans with that.
Boom. Absolutely Ivy League. Hi, love.
Hi.
As I understand it, you listened to an unedited version of an interview on a podcast.
I sure did.
Yeah.
Which was on a movie.
Well, the podcast wasn't on a movie. Rather, it talked about a movie.
Yeah.
Although I'm perfectly willing,
movie.
if there's any Hollywood studios out there that want to feature Therapist Theater on a movie, I'm willing
right
to
ahead.
do that. I do get the choice of who plays me, though.
Who would you pick?
I'll let you have the choice of who plays you.
Mm-hmm.
I'll say who I think we've already done this. Haven't we already done this? No, I did this. Okay. On the show?
No.
Oh. Yeah, so I think for me, I would say RDJ.
Yeah.
That's who I would. Robert Downey Jr.
Knew that.
Yeah. Who would you choose to play you?
Did you forget when we talked about it last?
Well, we did this in the couples quiz book. That's what we did. I think you said Jennifer Lawrence.
Yep.
Yeah. Can I say who I cast to play you?
You just said I got to choose, but sure.
No, but what I'm saying is, can I tell the listeners who
Yeah.
I originally... Yeah, I said Lauren Graham.
Oh, yeah.
Because you're a big Gilmore Girls fan.
Yeah, but it's about more than...
And she has dark hair. That's the other.
Is that really? That's what stands out to you about me? I'm a Gilmore Girls fan and I have dark hair.
No, that's
cool.
what stands out to me about her. There's a million things that stand out to me about you.
Yeah.
Who did you choose to play me?
Robert Downey Jr. I knew.
Oh,
yeah.
But I mean, like, if you were going to cast, who would you cast?
Well, I don't know. I haven't thought about it.
Think about it right now.
It's too much pressure. I
Well,
can't.
if you take
I'll
some
think
time
about it and report back.
remember that I can just edit out the silent part.
Nope. I'll think about it and report back next week. I need days.
Boom. Snailed it. Speaking of days, the next time that an episode is released will be on April the 17th, which not a lot of listeners know. Everybody in this room knows, but not a lot of listeners knows, is your birthday.
Sure is.
Yeah. So if you're listening to this, why don't you hit up Leigh-Ann on Twitter at LAMY. No, there's an underscore, right? It's at underscore LAMY17.
Yes.
Hit her up there. Tell her happy birthday. Or
Yes,
hit her up on Instagram, which is just at LAMY17.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Tell her happy birthday there. You could send her an owl.
Or you could send me a Starbucks gift card.
What if you just sent that Starbucks gift card to therapisttheater@gmail.com and I'll make sure that it gets to her?
Yeah, that's okay. Or Moe's. Either
I
one
don't
of
think they
those.
should send it to Moe's. I mean,
No,
we would never even know
Moe's
that it got there.
No. Moe's or Starbucks. You all know what to do.
That's right, listeners. Leigh-Ann likes to drink Starbucks while she eats her Moe's.
Gross.
And then spend a year in the bathroom.
All right.
So we watched Away We Go, and then I got to talk to Emily about it. Did you have anything that you wanted to add in?
No.
Cool. All right. Well, guys, thanks for listening to the episode.
I'm just kidding. I just thought it'd be funny to do that. I sure did. I really loved... Well, you mentioned on the podcast that when you got done watching the movie... when you and I got done watching the movie together, because we're married, you...
To each other.
Turned to me and then I said best movie ever and you said worst movie ever. So I just wanted to, I don't know, bring that up again and say I really did think it was the best movie ever. I really liked it for the first time viewing it. Which,
how much of that was influenced by Jim Halpert?
None. Truly none. I mean, I love Maya Rudolph too, and I really liked the movie. Like I just thought it was such a sweet story about two people thinking they need to have it all together, going on a journey and finding out nobody has it all together, which I love because I don't have anything together. So really makes me feel like I'm not alone. You see what I did there?
I don't, because I don't think you've said that part yet.
I haven't, but you guys talked about it. So if people have listened to this far, then they should know the callback.
There's a theme.
Yeah. Anyways, I loved it. And into the podcast, like into the interview with Emily, there was quite a few things that I loved. I found myself being a big fan of hers. Never met her before, but it was really cool to listen to her. One of the first things was when you guys were talking about kind of her why therapy story. She talked about her journey, through conception and birth, and starting her blog that got popular and how people were coming to her for advice. And then the quote from her was, I need to know what I'm talking about. And I just couldn't have loved anything more. Like, there's so many people in the world, I think, who have platforms and, speak with authority on things that don't have any training or education or sometimes even experience. And I just think that can be a dangerous thing. And I hope I don't come across as if everybody needs to have like a master's degree, because I know that's like a privileged thing, but
Well, yeah, and you don't actually need a degree. A library would do.
yeah, I just think it is like, if you're telling other people, I just appreciated the drive in her to be curious and to want to be, qualified if people were coming to her. I think that's so valuable, and I loved it.
Yeah, and I also heard a real heart and desire to continue to serve people and connect with them. And so it was just this beautiful marriage of I've developed a platform and I have a voice, and people are taking me seriously, and I want to steward that well and bring to them something worthwhile.
Yeah, which so just so good. I just loved it.
Yeah.
Also, like right after that, you guys sort of talked about the extremes of Insta moms, like Instagram moms. One being just the super messy, like Chardonnay at 9 a.m., but it's cute,
Hi, girl.
or funny. And then the other being just the super put together, which I think exists in all realms of life, like not just motherhood. I love talking about social media and like being authentic on it, and if people are authentic on it, because I just think that's something that's everywhere. Like, I think you could pick probably any topic and you could find, extreme versions presenting themselves
Outliers
on social media. Yeah.
Hashtag Malcolm Gladwell.
Yeah. And just that it's so easy to fall into a comparison trap with those. And it is also so interesting to think that most people are neither of those extremes. Even the people I think who are posting about it are probably not as much of those actual extremes, as they post, like,
That's true. And
as they present.
I think the biggest evidence of that is the phrase on brand. I think that they develop a brand and then they stick with it because they know that it's working. And I think that it's such an interesting concept because I think, so I don't know if those two, the Chardonnay at 9 a.m. and the super organizer, super mom, I don't know if those are the two opposite sides of the spectrum. But I certainly know that the overwhelming majority of people are located in the middle. And what's so funny is I think that comparison is part of human nature. Like, no matter who you are or what you do, there's always the temptation to look to others and compare yourself. And I mean, it's certainly something that I do. And I think what's interesting is you want to be a part of that outlier on one side. You want to be a part of that outlier on the other because you want to be a part of something. But we're all pretty much in the middle. We are the majority. We are already a part of the bigger group. And I think there is something to, seeing something that's shiny or new or that stands out. Oh, that's cool. That's exceptional. But it's also cool to be you.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong, of course, with admiring somebody.
Well, or I just had this thought, identifying, like, sure, some days you probably feel like, one extreme or the other. And so maybe it's cool to see that represented, but just to remember that's not all the time, even for those people.
Yeah. And I think, a conversation that we've had a ton is just learning, not settling, but being content. And I think just from, my own journey, something that I've learned is if you're not content, that you have agency in, I should say, because I'm saying about my journey, that I have agency in my life. And if I'm not content, I can take steps towards something different.
Yeah.
And that can be big steps, that could be little steps, but that I can, instead of remaining in my discontent and embracing comparison and really getting into like a resentment or shame or unhappiness cycle, I can say, okay, if I'm not satisfied, what would make me satisfied? How do I take steps towards that? And that's something that I did not learn until I would say my early 30s. Like, just that I had that ability.
I really like that. I'd like to put everything you just said up on a wall.
It's going to be a big cross stitch.
Yep. Well, I think we can do it.
I think so.
Miller could probably do it. He's a good cross stitcher.
He is.
So I think what I remember next is you guys talking about the grandparents leaving. I don't really have anything important to add other than just Emily said she'd be insulted, or she thought of it as kind of an insult, and I totally agree. I would be furious and hurt. I think hurt is just the biggest feeling that came to mind as we were watching that scene. I just can't fathom my family being about to welcome our first little nephew from my brother and sister-in-law. Like, it makes it even more real. Like, I just can't fathom grandparents doing that. But you guys were fair and pointed out that there's, the grandparents have a perspective as well. That's all about that.
Yeah. I do also think I can't imagine a set of grandparents that would leave the month before. I could totally imagine them going, we're going to plan to leave a month later. And then I think that's setting themselves up for not leaving. Because then as soon as they get the baby in their hands, they're like, either we're taking the baby with us or we're not going anywhere. I cannot imagine them leaving before. Yeah. That just seems so cold. I mean, I know that's probably there's people out there that do it, but there won't be any at my birthday party.
Yeah. Amen. The last big thing really is just when you guys talked about just miscarriages, and Munchie is what we think that her name was. I'm going to
look that up because that bothered me the whole time. It just seemed so unbelievable.
Maybe it was a nickname and that's just what they called her. But
that's the snack mix that has like Cheetos in it. Would you nickname a friend or a daughter after a Cheetos snack mix?
Maybe not a daughter, but a friend maybe.
Oh no, we're nicknaming our daughter Munchie. I'm declaring that right now.
Did you find it?
No, I'm in the middle of looking.
Oh. Well, anyways, you guys talked about her.
It's Munch. Oh. It really is on IMDb. She's just listed as Munch.
There you go. That's even worse almost. Okay, so Munch then dancing, and her husband telling the guy Bert about their miscarriages. Like just how sad that was, and seeing, I mean, you guys talked about this, seeing that in her dancing, like the sadness and the hurt and the, just the heaviness in her. And Emily talked more about this and about miscarriages in general and the loss, but it reminded me of something that I saw on social media, actually, from a friend from back home in South Carolina, who I'm not super close with, but she posted something about miscarriages being this weird, unsaid but really common thing, and it was, and I'm butchering it completely, but the idea of it was that it's like a secret club, and nobody says anything, but once you have one, suddenly of a million other people who have. And I just thought that's a strange just a strange norm around miscarriages, like, just because I think it is so helpful to know that you're not alone in something so devastating. So it's just interesting that it's kept so quiet. yeah. And I mean, and sad too. Like,
I wonder, and this is really something that I wish that I could have asked Emily in person and or even had her here now to ask. I wonder if there is almost an element of shame involved because you're grieving the loss of something that you, and I'm using air quotes here, didn't have. Because the baby hadn't been born yet, which it is 100% still a life, it's still an actual child, but you start preparing, you start decorating, you know, you change your wardrobe.
yeah.
You have all these things that signal the arrival of something that then you don't get to celebrate the arrival of. And so I wonder if there's an element of shame, like, oh, I can't grieve this publicly in the same way.
Yeah, I'm sure. I also know, I mean, I've talked to a person who had experience with this, who said that when she found out, the nurse that she talked to made a comment along the lines of, well, it was at this stage, so it wasn't really, it just was a very dismissive and shaming comment that then made the woman feel, I mean, you know, rightfully so. Well, I'm sorry, should I not feel?
Was I making a big deal out of something that wasn't a big deal?
Like it's exactly what you're saying. Like it was really shaming and dismissive of such a big pain. But I also think, and again, this is 100% speaking from other people's experiences and not my own. So I just want to acknowledge that if I say something wrong, I might be saying something wrong. And if so, I'm truly sorry. But I have heard that just in struggles with conception, that can be such a shame source if a couple is struggling to conceive. And so I would imagine that it could be shameful, in that way as well. Like if you have had a miscarriage, that you feel like you're something about you isn't working, you're not able to conceive, and you should be able to conceive. Like, what's wrong with me that I can't? That's something that I've read and have heard women talk about. So I think that's just an element of it as well.
Yeah. And I think, you know, anytime, shame is something that I deal with a lot in my practice when it comes to addictions. It's just something that's so prevalent, and shame is shame is shame is shame. And so I would say, you know, to anybody who maybe is dealing with a loss of a child, or maybe dealing with shame in their inability to conceive, I would just want to invite you to reach out for help, because shame only grows in the dark. Shame only grows in isolation, and to be able to speak with other people who can offer their support, who can offer their compassion, who can offer a message that you're not alone, and a shoulder, I think is just such a healing thing. And, you know, one of the things, and I am so glad that I asked Emily about this, is if you're not in Tennessee, if you're not in Middle Tennessee and you can't get to Emily's practice, she did invite you to email her, and maybe she has connections. She can point you in some directions to get help, to find something that's near you, to where you can get help in dealing with this.
Yeah, which, I mean, I think that was what I was going to say next, is just bringing it back to what a cool and needed area of practice that she's in.
It's so cool, and I had no idea it even existed.
I know.
I was just flummoxed and so impressed.
Good word.
Thank you. Yeah, that toilet paper word of the day is really paying off.
Yeah, that was a powerful part that you guys talked about. And the last thing really that I can think of is just, and I sort of was secretly hoping that you wouldn't say it so that I could say it, but then you guys did. Just that Bert and Verona
Like the coffee.
That Bert and Verona finally realized that nobody, has their stuff together. At the beginning of the movie, she sat down and said, I'm not going to say the bad word, are we F-ups? Because we don't even know how to live.
Yeah.
Then by the end...
We can substitute another word in if you want. Trombone. Let's do that.
We're trombone ups.
Yeah.
Which I love any story that demonstrates that everybody's dealing with their own stuff and that you might think that you're the only one who doesn't have it together. But the reality is no one does. We're all just doing the best we can. I love that.
Yeah. There's something beautiful in the fragility and the mess and the striving of life.
That was very deep.
I just think back on my life, and there have been many stumbles along the way, all of which are seams to the quilt that is currently my life.
You're getting very metaphorical and deep right here.
I like to think poetic.
I just wanted to appreciate it.
I like to think it's poetic. It's not.
It is.
And like on my Twitter, the pinned tweet that I have to the top of my timeline says, it's a Leonard Cohen lyric, and it says, "Ring the bells that still can ring. Forget your perfect offering. There is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in." And I think, when I pinned that up there is right after his death, and I think as a person who struggles against himself with perfection and who wants to begin things in the final phase and having it together, like we were talking about this earlier, the podcast was a very conscious choice. I'm not going to research this to death until I have it perfect before I start. I'm just going to start and figure it out. So I think as a person who naturally tries to gravitate towards getting it all right before I even start, I think, that lyric, it's a reminder to embrace the messiness. And I tell clients all the time, I had a boss many years ago that said, if something's worth doing, it's worth doing badly. And so that's something that I think in my life now I'm trying to embrace more and more, is just step up to the plate and swing as hard as you can. And if you strike, that's cool. If you foul, that's cool. If you hit, that's cool.
Wow. I love you.
I have just met you, and I love you. I love you. Do you have anything else? Any other thoughts?
No. I mean, I've got a lot of thoughts about life in general, but I think that was it for the podcast.
Cool.
It was a great episode and really, really cool to hear from Emily and hear about Emily.
Yeah, I agree. All right. So just to recap, everybody, next episode that drops, that's going to be on Leigh-Ann's birthday. So send those well wishes, _LAMY17 at Twitter, at LAMY17 on Instagram, or just email those gift cards at therapisttheater@gmail.com and she'll get them. Thank you guys so much for listening. If you haven't, please subscribe, leave us a 5-star review, and write a little review on there. It helps increase the visibility. It helps get our message out. And I think for right now, we're going to raise the lights and lower the curtain and say that for this week, the theater is closed.